Okay, welcome back everyone. So in the second part of the Android development session, what we are going to do is we are going to look into the various different applications that you can create. So I have summarized the most of the things which are quite useful for the educational perspective to for the beginner levels. So as you all remember that in the last session, we have already seen the concepts pertaining to calculator applications, that what are the several things. So maybe what we need, the manifest file is there, Java file is there, and the layout file is there, where we actually work with. Okay, just let me hide this first. Okay, so we know the perspective regarding, okay, it's still. So we already know the perspective of how to drag and drop the various UI components, how to hierarchically place our UI components. So we have several different layouts for the UI. So we can work with any of such UI and create an application of our choice. So with respective to the calculator application, we have already seen that we how we can place the different buttons for the different number. So now this particular application which I have shown you is one way to work with a calculator application. You can also have maybe like two text field, ask user to enter the operand one, operand two, and then ask user to enter the operator. But since we are talking about a development, we are making it friendly as possible. User don't need to here and there, and they can just simply select an appropriate option available on our screen. So we also looked into how to bind the Android UI component with our Java object, and we also went through the perspective of how we can carry out the event handling. So now just a quick summary on the event handling one more time, because it is the most important part for our application to work with. So we know that when we do some task, when we maybe click focus hover, so we know that we need to carry out the event handling with help of the appropriate event handlers and the registers. So now there are a few ways. I have shown you one approach of working with the event. That is when you create a Java object for the same. At that time, you need to register the event, and you also need to mention what you want to carry out the task or what you want to do when the event has occurred. So on my screen, you can see two ways to work with the event. The one on the right hand side indicates the code with the Java perspective, and one on the left hand side shows the XML perspective code. So here in the XML perspective, let's say before you move to the Java, before you buy, if you just want to define that in this layout, I want to define an event for a particular, that also we can do it. So here want to do, I want to go to the show toast function, and the show toast function will be responsible for doing the want to carry out as a occurring. So let me show you this particular part. So this is the first event handling that we right now. The second part of I've already seen, that is how we can set an click listener or how we can set listener or anything like that. The approach of doing when you want to do a reusability and when you want to carry out same set of operational components, and you can use maybe when parallelly want when you're parallelly want to set up the events that you want to register. So let me just show a quick demonstration for the same. So let's say I'm going to the calculator activity file over here in the XML layout component. So here, when you are designing or when you are dragging and dropping a particular button or any UI component, what you can do is parallelly you can also mention the event that you want to register and which function that can call. So here you can go to the attribute panel on the right side, and within the attribute, sorry, just a moment. Within the attribute panel over here, you can see this particular listener. That is a on-click listener. So for this on-click listener, what you want to carry out, what function you want to call, you can simply mention it over here. So let's say whenever someone is clicking on a button one, I want to call a function known as a show one. So here, as soon as I do this, as soon as I complete this task of a show one, parallelly you can also see the appropriate XML code over here. That is on click, it will go to the show one. So whether you are doing the event handling part explicitly or not in your Java code, it will always mention that which function to call when a function is getting clicked. So here in the calculator demo the class, when you are working with, what you are supposed to do is you are also supposed to mention the details of the show one function, which will be called when button number one is getting pressed. So that is another way of working with the event handling. So let's say at the end, what I am doing is after my create function, I can simply create a function that is just a moment, it's a show one. Okay. So here within this function, the event handling code. So just I'm not going into the depth of event handling is that what a event handling will do. So you can see over here show toast and then you can see the view. So I have missed out on the view part. Obviously, you need to know that which particular component is getting called or which particular component is calling this particular event or doing this particular event. And based on that, you can carry out the task that you are doing in a normal event listener function. The same thing you can do it over here. So same set of a task, I can easily do it over here like this. I do not need to mention the rest of the part of on click listener, view dot on click listener. So many a time, if you want to live out this specificity, you can easily do event handling like this. So this was just a quick overview of the event handling part, which is there. That is the two ways to carry out the event handling. So now, okay. So that's it for the presentation purpose. That most of the content that you have seen on my presentation part are referred from the Android Studio documentation, and you can easily find it on the dev.com because the most of recently supported in the current version of the Android. And some of the things, if you want to go into the depth, you can also go to the fundamentals. There are several good resources available which can help you begin with the Android programming. So now let's jump back to the practical approach for the same. So I'll leave aside the calculator demonstration now because we are done with it. Now let's see other applications on the hand that you can develop. Okay, I'll close this as well. Okay. So I'll first of all show you the layout screen and then parallelly we'll move back to the Java screen as well. So here I have created one more application that is a simple login screen application that you can develop. So in this login screen application, what I'm having is I'm having two fields that I'm expecting user to enter a data. So one is a username, the second is the password from the user, and the third thing which I am having is the button. So this particular button I have kept for a user to click, that is login. It also does the validation of whether the user has entered the correct ID and password. And the last, I'm also having one more text view over here. So the purpose of this particular text view is basically to give a prompt to the user that whether the user has entered the correct credentials or not. So as of now, this login screen is a standalone activity. We are not interlinking it to another application that once a user is logged in, he or she goes to the email screen or any other screen. So we'll keep it as it is. Now I'll move back to the XML part over here. You can see that the layout which I am using currently is a linear layout, and the orientation which I am using for the linear layout is a vertical orientation. So you can change this particular orientation and you can change how the layout works. So let's just for our understanding, I change it from vertical to horizontal. So you can see the change over here on the screen on my right. I'm only able to see the username. The rest of the components which are there are being overlapped on the last after the screen ends. So I'm not able to see it properly. So either I need to change the height and width or sorry, the width of the component appropriately, then and only the other components will be visible. So here I'll keep it as a vertical for a moment because it is more compatible for the application that we are discussing. However, whatever application that you are choosing, according to that, you can select the orientation, maybe horizontal or vertical in a scenario of a linear layout. Okay. So now you can see that all of the components are getting backed over here, and I'll change the width which I have modified to match to the parent. So similarly, we are also having similar attributes over here, maybe ID for your UI components, height and width, maybe some predefined input information, the input type that you are expecting, the details for the placement, details for the size and everything we are doing. We are also having a button over here in order for the login purpose and one from the prompt, whether the user has entered the details correctly or not. Okay, so this is regarding the UI component of the login screen. Now let's go to the Java part for the same. Okay, now in this particular application, again, what we are doing is data from the user and we so we have created the object for both of them. We have did text username and in order to get the detail name and user password, we the object for and the last the full text view. So for each of the component that we are having, what we are going to do is we are also going to bind them. So prior to binding, we are also over here mentioning the user and the password details that we are having. So this user and the password default are right now hard coded. You can change it or you can modify it or you can also access it using any content provider that you want. Now, apart from this, I have one more thing that is a battery status. So many of you might have already seen when I executed the application in the previous session that it was showing me the battery status. Now, how does this thing work? We'll keep it on hold for a few more minutes and then we'll come back to it. So here, again, just reiterating some of the key points. So we are going to whether a state is resumed or not. We are also mentioning that where my UI layout is present, then initializing the view or rather binding our data over here. So we are binding our Java components with our actual UI components which are there. So once this binding is done, what we need to do is we just need to set up a listener for a button login. And within the button login, I need to extract the data entered by the user. Then I need to check that whether the data is correct or not. So I'll just comment out this code in a for a minute, which is regarding the battery status. Okay, so once the details of the user and password are with us, what we do is we do a simple validation. Whether the entered username, that is just a normal validation that we carried out. If it is correct, we display a message that hello user. If it is not correct, we display a message that invalid. So for the last text view component that we are having, we are doing this particular task that is text view message dot set text and again text view message dot set text based on whatever detail the user has entered. So this is a basic task which we are doing for the validation. So if you already know the basics of the calculator application, this is just a easy kick through you can do. Now, apart from this particular login validation that I have mentioned, what you can do is you can modify to work this with the content provider. So what I will do now is I'll just quickly execute this login screen because it's just a simple application that you can easily develop. And then we'll see the next one for the student registration form or maybe employee registration form or any such data that you want to take from user. Okay. So now you can see the login screen over here. It asks me to enter the username. It asks me to enter the password. Now, since I priorly mentioned that whenever you're working with the text fields over here, you need to explicitly mention or select an appropriate type of an editable text component. So for a username, I know that it is having a alphanumeric part, so I can simply select it. Whereas password is concerned, we know that we don't want to show the password back to the person who is entering or if someone is overlooking. So obviously we need to select a password field accordingly. Otherwise, the component that you are selecting will not be in the format, will not be as per the UI requirements that you are initializing. So let's say I'm just entering a password, the correct password. So it shows me hello user over here. It's just a simple text prompt. So we can see that all the four components that we have worked with are right now visible to us. That is the user, username, user, password, login, and the prompt which is being displayed. Hello user. So this is how you can create a very simple login application. Even you can change that on particular login. I want the user to go to some other screen. So that also I can we can do easily over here. So now let's understand how to transit, how to take the data from a user and how to transit and pass it to the other screen with help of a student form over here. So I'll just stop this login application. Okay. So in this particular application regarding the student registration form or student detail form, so what I am doing right now is I've kept 4 to 5 components which ask users to enter the name, age, gender. Then I have a list and then I have a submit button which informs the which redirects my data to the next one. So let's see this components one by one. So what first thing I'm having over here is I'm having one label. That is, I'm having a text view over here. So this text view just informs, this is just an informatory information. It is not a editable one. Then the second one is my actual edit text component, which allows me to enter the full name. Next is the age component. And similarly, I also have an enter your age prompt, that is hint basically. I have a gender, and within the gender, I have a 3 sub options available. Then I have a select grade, which is again a text view. Then the next one is my spinner component. So please see this one. This is a new component in perspective to the rest of the components that we have discussed, that I want to provide a drop down to a user, and from the drop down, I want user to select one particular entry. So when you talk about a list, when you talk when you talk about a combo box, basically they show you several options. Now, from the several options, what type of a selection you want to carry out? You want user to select one item, you want user to select multiple items, or you want to select user to select a random unsequenced item. So depending on that, you need to configure these components which are there. So here from the palette part, from the palette panel, you can select this particular components which are there. So maybe if you want user to different types of the data over here, so you can directly go to the spinner, you can go to the list options available are there. You can also go to the recycler view options which are available. So spinner, recycler view are such options which allow user to select from multiple such things. Now see, these are two different part. However, spinner is like one selection. Recycler view is basically multiple similar components will be shown to the user. User can go to the one part and come back again. So that is how this screen for the registration form looks like. So now let me walk you through the layout part. So the layout for the first name, then the editable text, the age and the editable age remain same as we have already seen. So I'll not go into the depth of them. So we have the first text view for the student name, then the edit text for the age. Now talking about a gender. So for the gender, we have selected radio buttons. So now when you are working with the radio buttons, you need to see through a few things over here, that you need to create, first of all, a radio group. So whenever you are working with a checkbox, whenever you are working with the radio button, you need to mention those particular sub-component in the group. So interlink them with one another. As we know that in a scenario of a radio button, we can select only one option available. So your data will be combined, your data will be available in a single group over here. So we are selecting a radio group over here, and we are also defining the ID for this radio group. So once the radio group is selected, within the radio group, you need to have your sub radio buttons. Like I have three radio buttons, radio group. So I can have this particular facility. I can select a radio group over here from the palette of the buttons. And then what I can do is I can mention this radio buttons over here. Now, just to have an understanding of the flexibility over here, I'm just changing one part for our understanding so that you can easily relate. See, so similar to the radio buttons that you are having, you also can have your check boxes over here, and you can configure your check boxes over here. Now, whenever we are talking about a radio group, similar radio group can allow us to can also allow us to have the you don't need to differentiate them over here on what particular component it will behave in such scenario. So radio button, obviously it will allow us selection at a time, and if you are using a checkbox, you will have multi-selection at. So both the flexibility are provided the group itself. You don't need to worry that you don't need to change any group. The same can work for both. This just the selection will be dependent on the UI component that you are taking into consideration. Okay. So this is regarding the radio group that we have used in this particular example for gender selection. The next component that we are discussing is a spinner. So within the particular part, within the last part, I want user to select from grade 1 to 10. So now when you are doing such particular part, when you allow user to select, let's say maybe semester, when you allow user to select an out of an option, maybe out of 10 option, out of 5 options or anything, the spinner is one of the approach which you can use. Now for you, you can see a spinner over here. We just have a one spinner and you can see the item number one only. You don't need to initialize the data for your spinner or for your list at the layout screen. तो लेआउट स्क्रीन में हम सिर्फ यही बताएंगे कि हमें कौन सा कंपोनेंट यूज करना है वी डोंट नीड टू मेंशन दैट व्हाट डेटा विल बी देयर और हाउ टू इनिशियलाइज द डेटा एज फार एज द लिस्ट एंड स्पिनर्स आर कंसर्न. So now over here, what I am doing is I'm defining the spinner over here. Now the rest of the attribute, you can see that they are almost similar, almost common attributes of your Android view components. So you didn't need to worry over here. You can just simply design. You can show the UI over here. The rest of the part of the initial will do it in the controller or the JavaScript part here. So now our view component for the student form is done. So I'll close this XML part over here. I'll come back to the Java screen. Now we'll understand the other concepts related and transfer the data from one place to another. Just a moment, please. Okay, so same way, whatever components that we have used in the layout screen, so for them, we are first of all creating or we are initially just creating an object for them. So you can see that we have a edit text, we have a radio group, we have a spinner, we have a button. The usual practice first is to just declare out what things you are going to use in the subsequent part. Within the onCreate function, again, whether the data is getting resumed or not, where is my layout, initializing the views over here. Now, let's come to the part where you are having a multi-selection. Like in case of a spinner is there, like in case of a list view is there, how you can initialize the data. So for that, we are going to use a concept known as an adapters, array adapters over here. First of all, what we need to do is we need to initialize the array adapter. So this particular array adapters are basically, as we know that spinner and a list can contain multiple data of a similar form, which is nothing but an items of an array. So we are using an array adapter over here. So this array adapter, we are designing it over here from resources that are available to us. Now, to understand how it works over here, I'll just separate it out. The first thing is create from the resource. So as you see, whenever you see this particular word, resource, in any of your Java code, please go to your resource folder. So within this resource folder, which you are having here, you will have some information. So here, what we have is array adapter create from resource. The context which is this file r dot array dot grid is actual. Many a time when you are working with the Android application,